Chapter 7 from Lord of the Flies, Shadows and Tall Trees by Amanda, Sanju, and Mary Lou from iLearning's Period 7. In Chapter 7, we can prominently see just how much the boys have changed since they've been on the island. Even some of the characters, such as Ralph, realize how much they've changed. For example, in this quote, Ralph has sat down and is examining himself and notices how dirty he and the others are. Hair much too long, tangled here and there, knotted round a dead leaf or twig, faces cleaned fairly well, clothes worn away stiff like his own, skin of the body scruffy with brine. With this examination, you can see how much the boys have physically changed since they've got to the island and how they have detached from regular civil cleanliness. Later in the chapter, you see how drastically the boys have changed in personality and mentally. After a hunt for a boar, the boys get very excited and play a game that goes too far. Robert snarled at him, Ralph entered into play, and everybody laughed. Presently, they were all jabbing at Robert, who made mock rushes. Jack shouted, "Make a ring." The circle moved in and round. Robert squealed in mock terror, then in real pain. Here we see how an innocent game between the boys starts to escalate. In another quote, you can see how savage they have become. Ralph, carried away by sudden thick excitement, grabbed Eric's spear and jabbed at Robert with it. "Kill him, kill him." After the game ends, everyone is calmed. Ralph displays uneasiness and realization of the situation. "That was a good game." "Just a game," said Ralph uneasily. With all this development, it is very evident how detached to regular social life the boys have become and how savage they now are.
Man vs. Man represents the conflict between Jack and Ralph and the conflict between Roger and the hunters in Chapter 7. The conflict between Jack and Ralph has always been a part of the plot. In Chapter 7, the conflict intensifies when Jack challenges Ralph's status. Ralph does not want to hunt, but Jack challenges Ralph and urges him to hunt. Ralph is forced to accept Jack's request because he does not want to look weak in front of his peers. The sudden conflict of Roger versus the hunters is a bit of a surprise that presents itself in Chapter 7. The hunters engaged in an encounter with a boar, and the hunters were very excited from their encounter. The hunters wanted to play a game by acting out the encounter. The hunters got carried away, and the lure of darkness was overwhelming them. Ralph, too, was fighting to get near, to get a handful of that brown, vulnerable flesh. The desire to squeeze and hurt was overmastering. Jack's arm came down, the heaving circle cheered and made pig-dying noises. Then they lay quiet, panting, listening to Robert's frightened snivels. Golding, page 164. The hunters claimed that the occurrence was just a game, but this conflict has already contributed its role to the plot. This conflict supports the fact that the boys in general are turning into savage people. They are starting to go too far. Man versus self represents this battle inside of all of the boys. The fight between good versus evil is going on inside of the boys during this chapter. After the conflict with Roger and the hunters dismiss the fact that they hurt Roger as it was just a game, but this game has started a war inside of the boys. Man versus nature presents the conflict between the beastie and the hunters. In Chapter 7, the beastie is proved to be real, which means all of the past and future encounters with the beastie were not fictional.
William Golding created many symbols throughout this novel, but in Chapter 7 there is only one significant symbolized object, and that is the sea, the water. The water symbolizes as an obstacle for Ralph to escape. He felt like he couldn't go home because he thought that the sea was blocking his way of survival. Quote, "He turned and looked out to sea, wave after wave. Ralph followed the rise and fall until something of the remoteness of the sea numbed his brain. Then gradually, the almost infinite size of his water forced itself on his attention. This was the divider, the barrier. On the other side of the island, swathed at midday with mirage, defended by the shield of the quiet lagoon, one might dream of rescue, but here, faced by the brute obtuseness of the ocean, the miles of division, one was clamped down, one was helpless, one was condemned, one was." Golding 157 and 158. He had all negative thoughts and points of the simple sea.
Discussion question number 1. On the island, the boys' personalities develop. The hunters' personalities in particular evolve into darkness. Why do you think the hunters' personalities change so drastically while being on the island?
Jack and the hunters urge Ralph to hunt with them even though Ralph is not interested in hunting. Why do you think Ralph accepts the invitation from the hunters to hunt?
Question number 3. Would you give up in what you're doing when an obstacle comes in your way, like how the sea was an obstacle to Ralph's escape?